Judith stared at the divorce papers, her fingers trembling as she reached the sentence that stopped her cold. Wife has demonstrated consistent financial incompetence. Her eyes lingered on the phrase, each word a deliberate wound. Financially useless. That's what Daniel thought of her. The man she supported for 5 years. The man who scoffed at her startup while chasing get-rich schemes. Through the glass wall of her Palo Alto office, Judith watched Amanda, her secretary, laughing at her phone, swinging a designer handbag Judith had never seen before. The same brand Daniel's mother used to favor. Her breath stayed even. She didn't flinch. "My name is Judith. My husband labeled me financially useless just days before I sold my AI company for $800,000. And his mistress? She was 10 feet away, filing reports on a system she didn't understand." Ever watch someone underestimate you, then watch the FBI knock on their door? Judith and Daniel had been married for 5 years, living in the heart of Silicon Valley. Their marriage looked solid from the outside. 2 professionals, no kids yet, and a comfortable home in Palo Alto. But under the surface, cracks had been forming for a long time. Judith was a tech entrepreneur who had spent years developing an AI-driven market analysis platform. She started with nothing, just a laptop, some code, and a vision. Her company had grown. First clients, then investors, then acquisition talks. She worked 12-hour days, often from a small office tucked behind a co-working space. Daniel, by contrast, was all flash, a real estate investor who chased the high of quick flips and booming returns. He loved the spotlight, networking events, expensive watches, and talking loudly about his next big deal. When Judith talked about her AI algorithms or the value of data infrastructure, he'd shrugged and called it. Judith didn't complain. She focused on her work and let Daniel have his ego. She thought marriage meant balance, and she assumed their differences would eventually even out. That belief started to shift when Amanda entered the picture. Amanda was hired as Judith's administrative assistant 2 years into the startup's growth. She was sharp, efficient, and initially helpful. But Judith began noticing things. Amanda's lunches grew longer, more expensive. She started arriving late and leaving early. She was always on the phone in hushed tones, always glancing over company documents she had no reason to read. Judith tried to believe the best in people. She gave Amanda the benefit of the doubt. But red flags kept surfacing. New shoes, a diamond bracelet that looked suspiciously similar to one Judith used to own, and a weirdly specific interest in the company's acquisition process. Amanda was asking about investors, valuation methods, even projected returns. Judith logged it all mentally, unsure if she was being paranoid. Then came the blow that changed everything. Daniel, without warning, served Judith divorce papers. He wanted a clean break, claimed they had grown apart, and cited irreconcilable differences. But it was his written statement in the documents that lit a fire inside her. He called her financially incompetent, a burden, and claimed she had made no meaningful contribution to their household or future. It was insulting. And it was absurd. What Daniel didn't know, what Amanda didn't know, was that Judith's startup was days away from finalizing an acquisition deal worth $800,000. The paperwork was nearly complete. Every document, every valuation, had been carefully constructed without their knowledge. Judith hadn't hidden anything. She'd just stayed quiet. Because she'd learned something vital, in business and in life. Never interrupt your enemies when they're making a mistake. Judith sat in her office, watching Amanda through the glass wall, remembering all the small betrayals she'd overlooked. The false compliments, the flirty texts she once saw on Daniel's phone, the late nights he claimed were work meetings. It all made sense now. Amanda wasn't just her secretary, she was Daniel's mistress, and both of them had assumed Judith was too naive, too trusting, too soft to fight back. They were wrong. Dead wrong. Judith began to see the signs long before the truth came into focus. Amanda's questions were becoming unusually specific, far beyond what any secretary should ask. She started hovering near meetings about the company's acquisition talks, pretending to fetch coffee but lingering just a little too long. She'd casually ask about venture capitalists actually function. Judith answered cautiously, always keeping the details vague, but she noted every odd inquiry. Amanda was up to something. Judith just didn't know what yet. Around the same time, Daniel started working late more often. The man who used to demand attention now barely showed up at home, blaming meetings or out-of-town real estate deals. When he was around, he was distant, annoyed, and dismissive. Then Judith spotted Amanda, wearing a diamond tennis bracelet that looked exactly like the one Daniel's mother had given her for their second anniversary. Except this one was new, and Judith knew hers had been missing from her jewelry box for weeks. That was the final crack. Judith didn't let emotion rule her decisions. She didn't scream or accuse. She opened her laptop and contacted a private investigator. Her concern wasn't emotional betrayal, it was corporate theft. If Amanda was snooping for Daniel, trying to gather sensitive data about her startup's valuation or proprietary technology, Judith needed to know before the acquisition closed. She was sensed now. That kind of value came with risk and predators. A week later, the investigator delivered exactly what Judith expected. Photos of Daniel and Amanda, together at an upscale restaurant downtown, laughing too closely, holding hands beneath the table. Another set at a wine bar, Amanda resting her head on Daniel's shoulder, and a third set, this time shopping Daniel and Amanda's purse while she tried on designer heels. All of it. Textbook affair behavior. But that wasn't what infuriated Judith. What infuriated her was the knowledge that Amanda had smiled at her desk just hours after one of those outings. She had walked past Judith's office, answered her calls, even offered to pick up Judith's lunch, all with that same smug smirk. Judith saved the photos in a secure folder and said nothing. She had no intention of confronting either of them yet. The acquisition was still in progress. Her legal team had advised strict confidentiality until the ink was dry. And she wasn't about to give Daniel any excuse to stake a claim in what she had built from scratch. He thought she was losing, the divorce, that she was some soft, emotionally fragile woman he could walk away from while flaunting his new affair. What he didn't know was that Judith was finalizing an $800,000 deal behind the scenes, negotiating retention bonuses for her team, and preparing to lock down every piece of her intellectual property. Amanda and Daniel thought they were clever. Judith was about to show them just how wrong they were. Judith sat at the long mahogany conference table in her attorney's downtown Palo Alto office. 2 folders lay in front of her, one for the corporate acquisition of her AI company, the other for her divorce from Daniel. As surreal as it felt, the biggest transition of her professional life and the end of her marriage were happening on the same day. She adjusted her blazer, exhaled, and opened the folder marked divorce. Barbara, her corporate attorney, leaned forward. Judith, as long as Daniel doesn't contest the divorce and the acquisition remains undisclosed until it closes, he has no legal claim to the proceeds. You'll retain full ownership of all corporate assets through the date of sale. Judith nodded. Then let's proceed. She didn't flinch. She didn't cry. She didn't even blink. Daniel had called her financially useless. Soon she would have $800,000, 0 cents to her name, and, if he wasn't careful, criminal liability. After the paperwork was signed, Judith returned to her office with renewed clarity. She logged into the admin panel of her company's internal systems and revoked Amanda's access to all sensitive documentation. Then she rerouted Amanda's remaining permissions through a monitored server that would log every keystroke, every file opened, and every attempt to access proprietary data. She also sent a quiet memo to her department heads, alerting them that Amanda would be transitioning out. No specifics, just a heads up. Judith had already prepared retention bonuses for her core team, but Amanda wasn't included. As expected, Amanda walked into Judith's office 2 days later with an envelope in hand and a poorly concealed grin. "I'm submitting my resignation," she said. "I've accepted an exciting new opportunity, something a little more aligned with my long-term goals." Judith accepted the envelope without comment. "Thank you, Amanda. Best of luck." Amanda tilted her head, clearly expecting more of a reaction. When she didn't get one, she left. Judith turned to her laptop and opened Amanda's system logs. As expected, several attempts had been made to access old investor presentations, valuation projections, and archived pitch decks. But none of it mattered. Because what Amanda and Daniel didn't know was that Judith had only ever allowed Amanda access to superficial mock-ups. The real algorithms, the proprietary code that powered their predictive engine, were stored offline and protected by multi-factor encryption. Amanda had seen the polished front end. She had no idea what powered it. Judith didn't need to expose Amanda. Not yet. Let them believe they were running off with something valuable. Let them play their game of insider opportunity and fake exclusivity. The moment Amanda resigned, Judith had already triggered the final phase of her internal security protocol. Now she focused on preparing her team for the post-acquisition transition. A new leadership role awaited her, and she intended to walk into it with nothing, absolutely nothing, holding her back. Let Daniel gloat. Let Amanda scheme. Judith was done playing defense. They thought they were ahead of her, but Judith had built every step of this company, every line of code, every firewall. They were playing checkers. She had already won the chess match. The soft pop of champagne corks echoed through the glass-walled office as Judith stood near the company kitchen, raising a glass with her team. The acquisition was final. The AI platform she'd spent years building had officially been sold for $800,000, 0 cents, and every member of her core development and engineering crew was receiving a generous retention bonus. Applause rang out as she delivered the news. Smiles, handshakes, and the kind of laughter that only comes after years of shared sweat and sacrifice. Everyone was there, except Amanda. Judith made no mention of her. The name didn't deserve space in that moment. Amanda had already resigned. Her desk stood empty, her access revoked, her exit monitored and logged. As far as Judith was concerned, that chapter was closed, or so she thought. Her phone buzzed. A message from her VP of Engineering. "You're going to want to see this." Attached was a screenshot of a financial update. Daniel and Amanda had just secured a sizable personal loan, reportedly against Daniel's real estate holdings. Rumors were swirling that they were launching a boutique investment fund based on proprietary AI-powered trading models. Their sales pitch? Inside knowledge gleaned from Judith's company before the acquisition. Whispers began to travel through the office halls. A pair of junior developers in the break room exchanged knowing glances. Amanda said, "She had access to something huge," one murmured. "Said it was going to make Daniel and her millionaires within 6 months." Judith heard the rumors and didn't flinch. She knew Amanda never had access to the real algorithms. What she thought she had, client demo versions and simplified interface mock-ups, would be utterly useless without the back-end data streams and adaptive learning models. Still, the audacity was stunning. To build an entire investment fund on nothing more than illusion and stolen confidence. She stayed focused. Meetings, board introductions, and team transition plans filled her calendar. She kept her head down and let success do the talking. But privately, she kept tabs. And the news began rolling in. One of her former accounting assistants messaged her discreetly. "Just overheard 2 of Daniel's ex-colleagues say they dumped their savings into his new fund. Said Amanda promised 40% monthly returns, based on your AI." Another developer forwarded an email thread. Amanda had pitched several former clients from Judith's early startup days, using language suspiciously similar to old investor decks. Then the real shock came. Barbara, her attorney, called late one afternoon. "I've been contacted by one of your former investors," she said. "He thought Amanda's fund was an extension of your company. Turns out, she and Daniel have collected over $3 million already." Judith sat back in her chair, letting that number land. $3 million. From people who believed in their story, who thought Amanda had built something, instead of stealing illusions. The betrayal had officially gone public. And Judith? She remained calm, composed, watching the storm from her glass office, her signature quiet smile never leaving her face. They'd built a house of cards, and the wind was starting to blow. Judith was reviewing early results from a hospital pilot of her AI software when the knock came at her office door. A man in a navy suit stood just outside, flanked by a woman holding a laptop. Both held up credentials. FBI. We're investigating Amanda Martinez and Daniel Harrison for potential investment fraud and intellectual property misrepresentation, the agent said calmly. We understand Miss Martinez was employed here? Judith nodded and motioned for them to sit. She pulled up Amanda's HR records, system access logs, and administrative role documentation. Everything was clean and thorough. Amanda had access only to administrative interfaces. She never touched our backhand systems or proprietary code. Anything she implied to the contrary was fraudulent, Judith stated. She watched the agents nod as they took notes. One of them glanced up. You seem very prepared for this. I'm in the business of predictive analytics, Judith said dryly. We prepare before the damage happens. As the FBI continued their investigation, reports began circulating in the financial community. Daniel was rapidly liquidating assets, properties, brokerage accounts, even his Tesla. Whispers of investor lawsuits mounted. Amanda, meanwhile, had vanished. Her social media accounts went dark. Judith's private investigator later confirmed a one-way ticket had been purchased under an alias, destination unknown. Judith didn't dwell on it. Her attention was needed elsewhere. Her company's AI platform was now integrating with several regional hospitals, analyzing patient outcomes and optimizing care protocols. Another branch of the technology had just entered testing for climate modeling applications, aiding local governments in extreme weather preparation. She was no longer just a tech entrepreneur. She was leading a growing enterprise with global potential. Journalists reached out daily. Some asked about her ex-husband's alleged scam. Others were more cautious, curious about her company's expansion. She ignored most requests until the annual West Coast Tech Conference. On the main stage, Judith delivered a keynote on responsible innovation and the dangers of overpromising. She didn't mention Daniel or Amanda by name, but during the Q&A session, one reporter finally pushed. How do you feel about former employees using their proximity to your company to mislead investors? Judith didn't flinch. My company builds real solutions. What others do with their assumptions is their problem. The audience applauded. The sound echoed with weight. As Judith stepped off stage, her phone buzzed. A message from Barbara, her corporate attorney. FBI just confirmed $5,200,000, 0 cent in fraudulent enmannment, most traced to Daniel's fund. Amanda still MIA. Judith simply replied, "Thanks, keep me posted." Later that week, she walked through the expanded floor of her Palo Alto office. Developers, analysts, and engineers bustled around her, screens full of real data, real breakthroughs. No illusions here. Meanwhile, Daniel's name appeared in more headlines. His office had been stormed by angry investors. His real estate firm shut down. Lawsuits poured in. His LinkedIn page vanished. Judith watched from her hilltop condo, sipping tea as dusk fell over Silicon Valley. Amanda and Daniel had built their futures on lies. She'd built hers on code, integrity, and discipline. And now, while they scrambled for escape routes, she was hiring her third round of engineers to develop real-time analytics for global logistics. The power shift wasn't loud. It was quiet, measured, inevitable. And Judith never looked back. The headline hit Judith's inbox early one morning. Real estate mogul's office shut down amid fraud investigation. She clicked the article and immediately recognized the photo. Daniel's former office now surrounded by a crowd of furious investors. Handwritten signs read, "LIAR, thief," and "Where's our money?" According to the report, Daniel and Amanda had used doctored graphs, fabricated profit sheets, and snippets of Judith's software interface to convince people they had access to revolutionary AI-based trading systems. They had promised investors absurd monthly returns, upwards of 40%, claiming their advantage came from inside knowledge and next-gen algorithms. It was an illusion, one that worked well enough to pull in over $5 million. And now, it was crumbling. Amanda had vanished weeks earlier. Her last digital trail led to Dubai, then Singapore, and finally, nothing. Empty shell companies were being unraveled by the feds, and every new lead added more names to the list of defrauded investors. Daniel, however, wasn't as lucky. Judith was preparing slides for a board presentation when her phone lit up with a message from Barbara. "He's been arrested. Fake passport. Buenos Aires airport." Judith paused, took a long sip of wine, and moved on to the next slide. Days later, the Wall Street Journal published a front-page exposé. It detailed how Amanda had manipulated her proximity to Judith's company, creating false documents and investor decks that mimicked the real product. They even included snippets of conversations lifted from Judith's company Slack logs. Amanda had taken screenshots, repackaged them, and passed them off as technical insight. Judith had never mentioned Amanda by name in any public statement. She didn't have to. The facts spoke for themselves. The day Daniel stood before the federal judge, Judith stood before hundreds of industry leaders at a national innovation summit. Her company's AI platform had just won Innovation of the Year, and Judith was scheduled to deliver the keynote. Her voice was calm, composed. "In a world where people chase shortcuts, we chose to build something real. That's the difference between innovation and imitation. One creates value, the other creates collapse." Applause echoed across the auditorium. Just hours later, the sentencing was finalized. Daniel Harrison testified in federal prison for wire fraud, investment fraud, and conspiracy. Amanda was still missing, likely in hiding with the bulk of the money. Barbara sent the final update via encrypted message. Interpol issued a red notice. Amanda's officially on the run. The last of Daniel's seized assets, $42,000, 0 cents in a hidden Nevada account. Judith replied with one sentence: "Karma always finishes the job." That evening, she stood on the balcony of her penthouse, watching the lights of Silicon Valley glitter below. Behind her, a boardroom prepped for her next morning's meeting. Ahead of her, a company valued at over $100 million, 0 cents and rising fast. She didn't gloat. She didn't post. She simply lived. While Daniel and Amanda chased fake wealth, she had created something lasting. And in the end, the world saw the truth. One empire had been a lie. The other, a legacy. Judith didn't waste a second looking back. While Daniel's mugshot made its way through news feeds and Amanda's disappearance became internet gossip, Judith was already setting up satellite offices in Singapore, London, and Toronto. Her AI company wasn't just surviving, it was becoming a global powerhouse. Hospitals across 3 continents were adopting her software for predictive diagnostics. Climate scientists were partnering with her team to analyze long-term patterns with unprecedented precision. With every success, Judith reinvested in people who reminded her of herself. She established the Kennedy Fellowship, a scholarship program for women pursuing degrees in tech and finance. The first year, 5 young women from underfunded schools received full tuition, mentorship, and guaranteed internships. The second year, that number tripled. She accepted an invitation to speak at Stanford's School of Engineering, standing before hundreds of aspiring minds. Her topic: real innovation versus villain, not just flashy ideas. During the Q&A, a student asked her, "Do you ever think about the people who tried to sabotage you?" Judith didn't hesitate. "I was too busy building something real to care about their downfall." It became the quote that followed her in articles, on podcasts, even etched into the walls of their company's new headquarters. Judith also started quietly mentoring other women who had faced similar betrayal. Partners who doubted them, colleagues who overlooked them, teams that ignored their potential. She didn't just teach them strategy, she taught them to reclaim power with dignity. Her story didn't become a tale of revenge, it became a blueprint for reinvention. Judith's strength wasn't born from spite, it had always been there, waiting for the right moment to emerge. And when it did, it changed everything. Judith strolled through the 3-floor headquarters of her company in Palo Alto, nodding at team leads as they discussed datasets and breakthroughs. On one screen, their AI software analyzed real-time cancer treatment outcomes. On another, it projected environmental shifts to help small island nations prepare for climate threats. The energy in the building wasn't just about profit, it was about purpose. It was everything she had dreamed of when she started writing algorithms in her cramped apartment years ago. Her phone buzzed with a news alert. The FBI had just seized Daniel's final hidden account. Only $42,000, 0 cents remained, barely enough to cover a month's rent in the Bay Area. Amanda was still missing, presumed overseas. Judith didn't react. There was no need. Their chapter had long since closed. That night, she stood on the balcony of her hillside condo, a cup of coffee warming her hands as the city lights shimmered across Silicon Valley. The hum of innovation and ambition filled the air. She thought of the path behind her, the betrayal, the dismissal, the quiet revenge that never needed shouting. Judith smiled softly. A man who called me financially useless gave me the push I needed to change the world. She raised her cup slightly, as if to toast the skyline. Then she turned back inside, where plans for a new AI platform were already underway. Her journey wasn't about what she'd lost. It was about what she had built, and what came next.